My name is Amelia, and I am a lively, cheerful girl who once believed I had everything I needed in life. I used to think that my life was perfect, that nothing could shake the happiness and stability I had. All of that changed one fateful night. It was that night when everything I once believed in, everything I loved, was swept away in an instant. My world was turned upside down in the blink of an eye. Make sure to subscribe to my channel so I can continue bringing you more fascinating true stories like this one. And don't forget to watch this video till the end and like the video because this story is going to be incredibly interesting. Please hit the like button to show your support. The man I had always relied on, my father Thomas, was a successful, wealthy man. He had worked his whole life to achieve everything he had, and to me, he was the greatest man in the world. My mother passed away when I was very young, and although he was heartbroken by her loss, he never remarried. Instead, he poured all his love, energy, and attention into raising me as his only daughter. He made sure I never felt lonely. Even though he was constantly busy with work, we lived in New York, the city that never sleeps, where everything is bright, fast-paced, and full of life. People from all over the world come here to face their dreams, and I always felt like I was living a dream myself. Despite the excitement and fast-paced lifestyle, there was always a sense of mystery surrounding my father's life. He was a man of means, and his success allowed him to buy multiple properties all around the city. But even though we lived in one of those properties, I could never truly tell where home was. Every time we moved, he would point to a new building or a luxurious villa, saying, "I own a few houses here," or "That's one of my properties over there." The more I heard it, the more I started to wonder just how much money he had. But even though I knew he was wealthy, I never questioned his ability to afford it all. He had earned it, and he had worked hard for it. My father had a large circle of friends, many of whom were powerful figures in business and society. They were influential people. Some were politicians. Others were CEOs or founders of large corporations. These were the people who ran the world, and my father was one of them. At lavish parties and high-end events, my father was always invited. He was well-known, well-liked, and respected by everyone he met, and I, as his only daughter, was often by his side. I was used to accompanying him, walking with him through crowded rooms, listening to his stories, and receiving compliments from his friends about how much I had grown or how beautiful I looked. Among my father's friends, Max stood out the most. Max and my father had been close since their college days. They had endured difficult times together, struggled to build their business from the ground up, and eventually achieved success. Max was the only person my father truly trusted. He often said, "With Max, I feel like I have another brother." These words left a lasting impression on me. They were more than just words. They were the foundation of what seemed like an unshakable bond. Max was a gentleman. He had an air of confidence, well-spoken, and always carrying a warm, inviting smile. He was popular among my father's colleagues, admired by many, and well-liked by everyone who knew him. He had a natural way of making people feel comfortable, like they had known him forever. He was the kind of person you could trust instantly. I admired him. After all, my father had always trusted him. To me, Max was an uncle of sorts, someone I could talk to without hesitation, someone I could go to for advice. At family gatherings and parties, he would often pull me aside, compliment me on my intelligence and beauty, and tell me how proud he was of me. But there was something I failed to notice, a strange look he sometimes gave me. It was fleeting, almost imperceptible, but it lingered in my mind. When I think back now, I realize just how wrong I was to trust him as much as I did. That fateful night began like any other. It was a big event held at an upscale hotel where my father was invited as the keynote speaker. He had prepared extensively for his speech, and I accompanied him to show my support. As usual, my father was busy talking with other businessmen and colleagues, leaving me to enjoy the atmosphere of the event. The music, laughter, and chatter filled the air, making it feel like everyone was having the time of their lives. It was an exciting event, and I was happy to be there, standing by my father's side. But soon, Max appeared. He greeted me with a smile and asked how I was doing. He inquired about my studies, complimented my dress, and told me how lovely I looked. I smiled back, feeling flattered, also thinking that he was just being a good family friend. In that moment, I thought nothing of it. I never imagined what would happen next. After a while, I excused myself to find the bathroom. I politely said goodbye to Max and walked away, but midway through the hotel, I realized I had no idea where the bathroom was in such a large building. While I stood there trying to figure it out, Max appeared again, almost as if he knew exactly where I was and what I needed. He smiled and said, "Let me show you the way. This hotel is enormous. It's easy to get lost." I trusted him completely. I had no reason to think otherwise. He had always been kind to me, and I thought he was just being helpful. I followed him as he led me down long, brightly lit corridors. Eventually, he pointed to a door and said, "This is the ladies' room." I stepped inside, relieved to finally find it. But before I could close the door, I heard the sound of quick footsteps behind me. Before I could react, Max entered the restroom and blocked the door with both hands. The sound of the lock clicking shut echoed in my ears, freezing me in place. It was then that I saw his eyes no longer warm, friendly, or polite. They were cold, calculating. His smile had shifted into something sinister. I could feel my body go cold, my heart racing in panic. "Max, what are you doing?" I asked, my voice trembling with fear but trying to sound calm. He didn't answer. He moved closer to me, his eyes never leaving mine. I felt trapped. I tried to back away, but my back hit the wall. The door behind me was locked, and there was no one around to hear me if I screamed. The following moments felt like an eternity. The man I had trusted, the man my father had trusted, had become someone I could no longer recognize. Max, once a family friend, had turned into a threat, a danger that was now cornering me, and I felt helpless. My thoughts were racing, but my body was paralyzed with fear. He moved closer, and I continued to back away, but the bathroom was too small. There was nowhere to go. I was trapped. Max's eyes were no longer warm or kind. Instead, they were full of cold desire, and his smile twisted into something dark. "Don't be afraid," he said, his voice soft but forceful. "I just want to talk like we used to." "Max, what are you doing?" I demanded, my voice cracking. "This is the bathroom. Get out." But he ignored me. He just smiled faintly and placed his hand on my shoulder. I tried to pull away, but his grip was too strong. Panic surged through me. I shouted, "Let me go. You can't do this." "No one can hear you," he said coldly. "It's just you and me here." His words felt like a dagger in my chest. I struggled harder, pushing against him with all my strength, but he was too powerful. It felt like the walls were closing in, like there was no escape. I was trapped, isolated, and there was no one around to help. Max moved closer again, his voice dripping with malice. "You know I care about you, right? Your dad doesn't need to know. No one needs to know." Those words cut through me, making everything feel worse. They shattered the last remnants of trust I had in him. I couldn't take it anymore. I screamed, hoping someone outside would hear me, but the loud music and laughter from the party drowned out my cries. I felt so alone, so helpless, as if I were completely invisible to the world around me. Max didn't stop. He pushed forward, overwhelming me with his strength. I struggled, but it was futile. My attempts to escape were useless. He continued his assault, his actions more horrifying than anything I had ever imagined. Every part of my body screamed in terror, but no one was there to help me. The night became a blur of pain and fear, a nightmare that felt endless. When Max finally left, I thought I was free. I sat on the floor, trembling, too weak to stand, but before I could leave, Max returned. He smiled again, his eyes filled with something dangerous, as if he had planned it all. He pushed me back into the nightmare, over and over again, each time more terrifying than the last. I lost track of time. I didn't know how long I had been trapped there. Finally, when I thought I couldn't endure any more, the door burst open. Light flooded the room, and my father's voice called out to me. "Amelia, where are you?" He rushed in, and time seemed to freeze when he saw me, trembling, broken, and weak. His face went pale, his eyes filled with horror and pain. My father lifted me in his arms. His voice choked with emotion as he screamed for help. As he held me, his gaze turned to Max, who stood frozen in the corner, terror written all over his face. My father's rage was palpable. He rushed at Max, his fists flying. "You dare to do this to my daughter!" he shouted, landing punch after punch. Max staggered but didn't fall. My father didn't stop. The pain of betrayal fueled each strike. I watched, numb. My mind was blank, unable to process what was happening. My father was delivering blow after blow, each one filled with fury. Everyone in the room panicked, but no one dared to stop him. I sat there, frozen, watching as my father fought Max, each punch seeming like it would kill him. Finally, security arrived and everything calmed down. I passed out, unable to hold on any longer. When I woke up, the sterile light of the hospital room greeted me. My body was sore, and my mind was clouded with the memories of the nightmare. My father was sitting beside me, his face swollen from crying. He held my hand, whispering through tears, "Amelia, I'm so sorry. I couldn't protect you." I didn't respond. I just stared at him, feeling the weight of everything. I had never seen him so vulnerable, so broken. The days that followed were a blur. My father did everything he could to help me recover. He fought with the police, making sure the evidence was preserved. He ensured that Max was arrested and held accountable for what he did to me. The investigation was swift. The police gathered the evidence, my testimony, and the medical reports. Everything pointed to Max as the perpetrator. Max tried to defend himself, blaming me for what happened, but the truth was undeniable. With his connections, my father hired the best legal team to ensure Max would face justice. Max was convicted and sentenced to 15 years in prison. Seeing him led away in handcuffs was the first time I felt relief. The nightmare was finally over. My father hugged me, his tears falling onto my shoulder, but the journey was far from over. Although Max was behind bars, my path to healing had just begun. I realized that the road ahead would be difficult. It would take time to heal from both the physical and emotional scars left by that night. But I also realized something important. Justice had been served, and I had survived. With my father by my side, I learned to fight through the pain, to face my fears, and to never let my past define me. As I look back on this experience, I know that my story is not just about seeking justice, but about understanding that silence is the enemy when we face trauma and injustice. If you are experiencing something similar, please speak up. Don't suffer in silence. There are people who care, people who will help. Remember that you are stronger than you think, and no matter how dark the days may seem, there's always light at the end. Thank you for listening to today's story. Please like, share, and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any of our future videos. Goodbye, and may you always find peace and strength no matter what life brings.